Hi, everyone. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today as we explore what we know is a critical topic for our talent community and employers today, which is childcare. My name is Kenefra Carter, and I'm the DE&I Program Manager here at the Mom Project. Today, I've got with me Dr. Pam Cohen, welcome, and Abby Haynes of Werklabs, which is the Research and Insights Division here at TNP, to talk about Worklabs' latest research on childcare, which is an important topic for us at TNP because it affects the moms that we serve in our community, as well as the clients we partner with who hire her. The rising need and cost of childcare is a challenge, and we all have to collectively tackle it together. However, before we begin our conversation on childcare, I would like to pass it over for Pam and Abby to introduce the research, and I'll first touch on some housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and we will be sent out to all registered attendees after the event. We will also be sending out a copy of the child care and work with all the findings that we discussed here today. In that email, there will also be a link to a brief survey about today's panel. Please take a minute to fill this out so that we can better our webinar experiences in the future. We will save time at the end of our discussion for a Q&A. And if you have any questions throughout the panel, feel free to drop them in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll try to answer them at the end. All right, Pam, talk to us about this research. First, introduce yourself, and then begin the conversation about the research.
Great. Thank you, Kenefra. I'm Pam Cohen. I head up Worklabs, which is the research division of the Mom Project. We dedicate our research to things that will improve the workplace for employees and work with employers on how to do that. Critical issues like childcare, like DEI efforts, like flexibility, and all the things that impact making a workplace functional and excellent. So in this case, we've really known for quite a while at Worklabs and Mom Project that there was a need to do a robust study on childcare. The pandemic certainly made that more apparent from our standpoint, and certainly there were a lot of shifts in childcare and availability across the pandemic. We saw firsthand as organizations and employees that we can't separate the impact that childcare has on our ability to work and how work has an impact on our ability to manage children. We also have come to be very concerned about things like childcare deserts, where there is no childcare available. Actually, 51% of all US citizens live in childcare deserts, according to the Center for American Progress. So this is a really serious issue. But as organizations have started to return to the office, and as we move out of the pandemic or the next phase of the pandemic, there's no better time for organizations to begin to rethink their benefits and offerings. If people aren't getting adequate childcare, people aren't getting childcare, people are losing opportunities themselves, but the organizations lose out as well. If people aren't leaving entirely, they also lose mind share, where people can't focus on their work because they're thinking about what they need to do about their kids, how best to care for them. In terms of why this work is important, with the present research, we're able to link drivers of childcare to what we're calling a work-life integration index, which is essentially the extent to which the current childcare situation of moms impacts their feelings of being able to succeed at home as well as to succeed at work. But then we can link back those to key performance outcomes, such as their ability to perform at work. Also, their likelihood to recommend their company, their organization as a place to work, and things like productivity and promotability. Put simply, the likelihood that moms will recommend their workplace to a friend or a colleague to be more productive in the workplace across the coming time, a year, 3 years, and likelihood that they will stay and that they will be promoted. So really what we have in our study is the ability to apply a direct link between childcare and why organizations should care about childcare to bottom line performance, where that's necessary. And for employers, we highlight how providing flexibility, and especially flexibility for childcare considerations, increases the likelihood that moms will stay in an organization.
That is such an amazing thing to say, because I know that those two things link directly. Like, we need clients to come on board, our customers, we need our community to come on board. And Abby, for those who are listening that are part of our talent community or have registered profiles with TNP, can you tell them why their participation really matters?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I'll use that as an opportunity to talk through our research process for this study as well. So we began by first really knowing we need to understand the narratives of moms who are experiencing these childcare realities. So we were really on the ground doing phone interviews, one-on-one qualitative interviews with moms from our talent community. So hearing their unique experiences, their unique challenges, what supported them in their workplace, where they needed additional support. We got all of that through these one-on-one conversations. From there, we did a line-by-line coding of those transcripts to unearth what the key themes are. Like, what are moms most talking about when they talk about childcare? From there, we created a survey instrument that we then fielded to our talent community via email, via our LinkedIn social channels. So a big plug to get registered or follow us if you aren't already. And we had the most participation in this survey compared to all other surveys in our past. And it just really spoke to the need for this research. It was about an 8 to 10 minute survey, and we saw people spending, upwards of a half hour, 45 minutes to an hour taking the survey, because they were really spending the time to fill out those open-ended sections and tell their stories about childcare. And from that, we just got really rich narratives, really rich data that we then ran predictive analytics on, so that we could link what those key drivers of childcare are to those performance outcomes. So really excited that we can share with talent and employers today, like, what is most impactful to employee experiences, so that we can drive some meaningful change here.
That is really important. I think that I know from my own personal experience, so I want to start this conversation on our research and set some of the stage. There's two types of drivers that impact the extent which moms feel able to be successful at home and at work. And those are personal factors and employer factors, are essentially drivers that more so have to do with things that are happening at home related to our childcare, and those that are more in the realm of control of organizations to impact. And I know that we all feel that on both levels. And I know that I have personally, when I was going through, everybody, it wasn't just me, like, we all were going through COVID and school shut down. And my daughter was in kindergarten, work shut down. So I had to learn how to juggle her at home and work. There was nowhere for her to go. There was no childcare. There's nowhere for me to put her. I was the teacher. I was the childcare. I was the employee. And that was one of the most difficult times that I experienced, because it was very difficult to be all things. And what we find even now is, like, when she gets home from school, you still don't get to take the hat off of being a mother or being an employee. And so I struggle in how to balance both of those things. So I know that also well. I know that so many moms experience this. I'm not surprised that so many completed this survey and wanted to have this conversation, because it is our real life. We're literally juggling our jobs and juggling childcare, and better when I know that my daughter is secure. And so when you don't have that, it's a very difficult place to be. At a very high level, let's say if some of our audience has to leave in the next 5 to 10 minutes, what are the key findings that we should take away from this webinar? How do we help our moms?
Good question. So to do that, let's discuss the most strong and impactful drivers. And by strongest drivers, we mean the drivers that most positively impact mom's feeling of success at home and work, and ultimately those performance outcomes that we discussed earlier that really matter at work as well. So the strongest drivers are the personal factors that you mentioned. The first is childcare accessibility. And by accessibility, we mean ease of finding childcare that meets a family's needs, the availability of quality childcare centers for the region, and emphasis on quality. and accessibility of conveniently located childcare. Of all the personal drivers of childcare that we'll talk about, accessibility is the most impactful, which really reinforces the need to address childcare deserts and solve for lack of access. And again, access alone is not enough. It has to be access with quality care. Moms aren't going to leave, to your point, Kenefra, their children someplace where they're not feeling comfortable. And they're not going to be able to get to work and focus on that work unless they feel like their children are at some place that is of quality. So in our interviews, we had many moms telling us that they have put their children's names on a wait list only months after having learned about their pregnancy, or being on a wait list for 3+ years, which is really untenable.
Yeah. And then building on that, so part 2, that's the personal factor that's most impactful to balancing, work and home. The employer side, what we see is that employer flexibility is the strongest driver impacting mom's ability to manage childcare and work. And more specifically, it goes beyond just having those flexible work hours to care for kids, to do pickups, drop-offs, right? Things like that. But it's more about an understanding too. So we see that the extent to which coworkers are understanding of unique flexibility needs due to childcare throughout the day. And we see that extent to which managers are understanding of that as well for moms. It's so impactful to their ability to manage those things, and also just their likelihood to stay at that organization, right? And be more productive when they feel that those in their most immediate network and sphere at work are really supporting them and their unique flexibility needs. And so building on that, what we found was really interesting was, not only is this important, but it's about 5 to 10 more times impactful than all other workplace drivers. So there's a clear finding here that if organizations are looking to support childcare needs today, support childcare realities, the most important thing that they can do is promote flexibility, and not just that remote offering, right? It's an organizational understanding of unique flexibility needs, of an ability to step away throughout the day, go to those pickups, drop-offs, be present in their kids' lives so that they can accommodate, both work and home. And Kenefra, you can probably speak a bit more to how this, plays out in organizations, but it's clearly really impactful work to do.
It is very impactful. And thank you for sharing all of that knowledge. It's so important that organizations understand that work-life balance for moms is also during the day. It's not just when we can clock out and when we can clock in, but when we can be present with our families. And one of the things that I think TNP does extremely well has offered me that balance of being able to be a mom and to be present and to do my work efficiently. One of the things that I want employers and our moms to understand is that when you have that balance, you can show up and work at your best capability, and they're giving you so much more than what you probably ever thought that you'd be able to get. So I'll use myself as that example. TNP allows me to drop my daughter off at school. So I get to talk to her, spend that time with her on the way to school. I'm fully present with her. I get to come back, be my best self here at work, and be insightful and thoughtful. And I know that she's okay. And I didn't have that guilt of, I didn't get to take her to school, or I didn't get to show up and be present. At the end of the day, I have a block on my calendar. It's not even the end of the day because I come back to work after that. It's about 3:00 where my daughter gets off the bus and I get to greet her. I get to give her a snack. I get to be a part of her day. I get to ask her how her day went. My employees respect that I want to spend that 30 minutes with my daughter. I get to then get her settled, come back, and be fully present at work. So those things are so important. Our employers need to know that our moms are so much more refreshed and better and thoughtful and kind, and not feeling so like guilt driven, because I had that too, where it was like I felt guilty about the time, those 30 minutes. I felt guilty about, should I be there right at 8 o'clock? And when my employer offered me the flexibility of showing up and being present with my daughter and ensuring that I got her to where she needed to go to be cared for, and that I was able to then be fully present for work, I was able to bring my best self to work. And so I know that now we're going to dig in a little more into the findings of the report. So let's explore those personal factors and then transition to talking about the employer factors. Pam, you've already touched on accessibility. The remaining drivers are cost, community support, family support, in-home and after-school support. And for the sake of time, how about we focus primarily on cost and community?
Sure. That's great. 35% of surveyed respondents in our survey reported that they or a partner had left work at some point due to the high cost of childcare, which is really quite horrifying. We had multiple people in our interviews mention how the cost of childcare was equivalent to that of a mortgage payment each month. And more specifically, we see in our analytics that there's a negative relationship between cost trade-offs and work-life integration, indicating that respondents want to keep working in their present capacity. But the more they reduce their work or even consider reducing their work because of the high cost of childcare, the less satisfied they are professionally and personally. And that's really a shame. You've got people leaving the workforce who wouldn't have otherwise, and people not enjoying jobs that they would have otherwise. And again, it's incumbent on employers to take notice of these things that people who would have been productive aren't. What's important to note is that for moms who have the option to reduce their hours or step away, many of the moms we also interviewed were single moms and talked about how leaving the workplace to not have to pay childcare just wasn't an option. I raised my own son as a single parent, and it never once occurred to me that it was possible to step away from the workforce. I used to sometimes kid that I was my own stay-at-home mother because I would do everything I can to do the kind of things that you were talking about, Kenefra, to make sure that the trade-offs I was making was so that I was there for him when he woke up, to have breakfast, to take him to school, and then aftercare, maybe I needed that. But, just this constant balance, this constant juggling. But stepping away from the workforce was not something that I could have or would have considered. So we're talking about a certain group that's able to do that, but then there are people who are forced into that and still can't afford it.
Right. And thank you so much for sharing that. I understand that myself. I am a single mother, so my daughter depends on me for all her care and all her needs. And I know that you understand how that is, Pam. And so even with coming with the cost of that, where you have trade-offs, right? So a lot of times we're talking about, I can't afford to do one thing in order to send them to care, and then the lack of emotional support that a lot of women experience as well around those trade-offs. It's very difficult. Abby, could you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. So this was a really, interesting and very prominent theme that came up in our interviews with moms about the need for emotional support. And then it really can come from a variety of different places, right? It could come from a partner, parents, especially any parents who are local. It could come from friends, childcare providers, therapists. But what is required to really get that true emotional support is a genuine understanding of the real challenges facing working parents today, especially during the pandemic and the new realities, right, of managing virtual schooling and unexpected closures. So a lot of respondents and those that we surveyed, the moms expressed that, it was trying times for everyone. So there was this desire to support others, to want to support other moms, but at the same point in time, being so exhausted that it didn't leave much room to have, that desire to support turn into like practical help. Interestingly, what we do see in the data is that moms report feeling on average more emotionally supported by friends than their extended family, which was about 11%. And that was really interesting for us. And we really could turn to the qualitative interviews to understand more why that might be. But it really seems to stem from this desire to get support and receive support from those that are currently in the trenches with you, right? Those that have children of similar ages, experiencing similar challenges, and be able to really empathize with one another in that. And we heard in our interviews, that mentioned that parents want to be supportive of childcare realities during the pandemic, but it's such a unique time, right? It's so different than caring for children any other time in history, that there just sometimes was that gap in understanding of like what day-to-day work and day-to-day childcare realities could look like with virtual schooling and childcare and daycare closures.
And that's why I think it's so important from an organization standpoint that we do build in support. Those support factors are so important. Those emotional support factors are important. ERGs, parental ERGs, where you can find your tribe, where you can find your people. And I think employers should be insightful and thought-provoking around that, like create space for women to find other women and other parents and people who are experiencing the same things they are. I feel like the best advice I sometimes get are from the other moms that I work with around how to juggle that day, how to build in that time, how not to feel overwhelmed, or because the other thing that we experience with all of these things is a little bit of burnout because you're doing so many things and wearing so many hats, and that childcare factor is so important. And so having people who understand and are a part of your tribe and being able to build that tribe and understand where you are is really an organization thing that I think should always happen. It's so important. So as we transition and move into talking about those employer factors and how they significantly impact navigating childcare realities for mom, flexibility by far was the most important driver. And I believe that myself wholeheartedly. So we'll have Pam dig deeper into that because we know that she can help us understand why that's so important.
Sure. Yeah, and it's good to note first and foremost that we in really studies going way back, flexibility is absolutely critical, but flexibility needs to be accompanied by respect for flexibility. In the absence of that, it really doesn't matter. They cancel each other out. So if you have organizations that say they have flexibility, but by taking it, you're looked down upon or you're not getting good assignments, that really negates everything. So it's really important to say flexibility goes hand in hand with respect from the organization. But within the driver of flexibility, the very impactful indicators are having flexibility to work to navigate those childcare realities, which may change from day to day, from week to week. But then the next are those elements of respect, coworkers' understanding of the unique need for flexibility due to childcare, and then managers' understanding of the unique need for flexibility due to childcare. And that needs to be first and foremost headed up by organizational leadership, understanding of unique flexibility needs. It has to come from the top down. In terms of managing childcare, we see that what's most impactful are those individuals in work whose moms closely interact with on a day-to-day basis. And we see that moms, by and large, feel that their organizational leadership, if they're less understanding of unique flexibility needs than their managers, 53% report understanding at the organizational level, and 65% report understanding at the manager and coworker level. So, it's happening, but maybe not at the rate that we would like to see.
So then we do have, Pam, the ability to reinforce these ideas and thoughts through management training sessions, maybe for people who don't have children and have that experience themselves, to give them insight to how some people may be feeling and how to better navigate that space, or even leadership educational opportunities. Do you think that's something that would help drive some more success here in this area?
It's so critical. I mean, that's a really astute observation. We've worked with so many companies with, great, even best in class programs for leave for parents, and then coming back and having great, childcare possibilities. But when you have managers who either don't have children or weren't the primary caretaker, oftentimes they can misunderstand what it means in terms of time, in terms of mind share. to be raising a child. It's not that you have to say, well, you have to absolutely know on a day-to-day level, but giving people the opportunity to understand just how much time it takes, and things like sleep deprivation, and the fact that you're always on, and the fact that you can never really take a sick day because you've got somebody else that you're taking care of, and juggling perhaps things that change at the child care facility. When managers start to understand that, they can be a lot more sympathetic, if not empathetic, and can start to adjust a lot better. That it's not a matter of people who have children just somehow need extra time. There's some really serious things going on. And when they've taken time away, they're not coming back feeling rested and refreshed. They're coming back from probably some difficult situation that they had to manage. And when a parent is told to pick their kid up from daycare, for example, because they're not feeling well, that's not a choice. That's a mandate. They have to be there. So the kind of training and educational opportunities that can serve well for leadership, again, either leadership who haven't had children, haven't been primary caretakers, or maybe it's been a while, that can be extremely helpful, just like with anything else, to help people understand what it's like to be a parent.
That's very thoughtful, because I think one of the things that's been challenging for all of us is finding that balance and hoping that our employer, our managers, the people who support us understand that, one, we never get to take the hat off. Like Pam said, like, it's a very unique set of circumstances to be a parent, and you're always on, you're always having to find the time to do both things. So that support, the training, getting our employers and managers to understand that they are unique drivers that help to have success in these areas. And the next one's really interesting to me, because it's very clear that actionable findings for organizations drive the impact of childcare, and how the organization's PTO policies, how they stack up against parental leave, like where they fall in these things, Abby, are really important. So can you talk to us about why those actionable items are the things that's really going to drive change for us?
Yeah, definitely. So in our research, we see that the extent to which PTO policies and parental leave policies are competitive is highly impactful for managing childcare and those performance outcomes like retention and likelihood to recommend that we were talking about earlier. And so in our interviews and talking with moms, PTO came up a lot. That was a reoccurring theme. And, it's something that they frequently mentioned. Having more PTO, taking PTO and having that be supported by coworkers, by the org, that's something that would really help moms feel more supported in navigating their child care realities, especially during the pandemic with unexpected closures, exposures, things like that, to have more sick days or even things like that to manage those unexpected changes. Like Pam said, it's, they're mandates, they're not optional, and it's not like a fun PTO day to take, but, having a competitive policy where you feel able to take that time and step away for those unexpected changes to childcare realities is really important. And so we saw that 59% of respondents report that their organization's PTO policy is competitive. So again, like Pam said, not terrible, but there is a lot of room for improvement there. And there's some clear ways that organizations can make their PTO policy a bit more competitive. It's building in those sick days, right? Like, it happens, it's inevitable, and having that built into policies so you're not always having to take a PTO day if you're sick is really something that could support parents more. It's also aligning company holidays with those that children typically take for school, right? Kids are going to be home regardless. And if a vast majority of people at an organization might be parents, that's something that's simple to do. And then also, it's just organizations being really mindful if they do offer that unlimited PTO, which is great, right? You can that's unlimited, wonderful. But if moms, parents, all employees really don't feel supported in taking that PTO, if they don't see others and leaders and managers taking time off, the extent to which it's unlimited really might not be that impactful, especially in navigating childcare realities. So making sure that PTO, unlimited PTO, comes with people actually using it is really important. The second, go ahead.
Right, no, you go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I'm going to jump in and say like how important that is, but you need to keep going.
No. I mean, it's so important. And that's where, we also have heard that moms are they understand that with unlimited PTO, there is that fear, right? That people don't actually use it, right? There's, widespread knowledge that typically those with unlimited PTO maybe take less PTO in reality. So it's just really interesting to talk to moms about that. But the second point is parental leave. Like Pam was mentioning earlier, talking about best-in-class parental leave policies, we saw fewer moms, 45% reporting that their company's paid family leave benefits were competitive, so less than PTO. And our team actually, not too long ago, coded the SKIMS data hashtag Show Us Your Leave database, which was a social media campaign calling on organizations to share their paid leave policies. And what we saw, granted, those are organizations that are likely, driving progress on offering really competitive parental leave policies. But what we saw there is that the average number of weeks offered is around 15. The most frequently offered leave time is 12 weeks, followed by 16 and 20 weeks. So really making sure that moms and parents have enough time to, experience those new moments, get a solid footing is really impactful for just future childcare realities, right? Like having that firm foundation provided by paid leave is something that can really impact just downstream childcare navigation for parents.
That is so I'm going to be selfish here. And I know that PTO and the driver of that, parental leave, all of those things like help establish how women and parents show up in a workspace and believe that they can use their time, right? So you did point out, like, even with unlimited PTO, people are afraid to use the time because they think they'll be judged for using the time. People are afraid to not, like I know that a lot of women bank their time. Like even if I'm sick or a mom is sick, they won't take the time for themselves because they feel like, oh, I need this time in order for, that thing to happen, like Pam alluded to, like if a daycare calls and you've got to get your child, I've got to get my kid. So we don't take the time because we want to bank it in case our kid needs it. So I want to ask, how can organizations financially support childcare? How can they help to build out these relationships with their employers to ensure that they feel supported, Pam?
Well, that's a great question. And of course, now that we've shown that organizations benefit from offering those kind of things, the financial output is much less than the gain that they will get. So they can either offer childcare on their own. Whether on-site or off-site or through a provider, or they can provide childcare stipends or other financial benefits. As organizations look to return to office and incentivize employees to return, as well as investing in on-site childcare, should be a consideration. The other thing to consider, and we actually have some upcoming work on this topic, is that parents of different age children require different needs. So for parents who don't use childcare stipends, for example, that could apply to a benefit more relevant, such as tutoring support, aftercare programs, sports programs, other things that you need as kids get older. Because of course you don't stop being a parent, their needs just change. But there's lots of ways that organizations can support and lend support that really are a lot less expensive for them, particularly where they work out group or other deals. Also offering emergency sitting services that people can use when they need a backup to their daycare, for example. They can either offer stipends or give coupons to their employees so that they can use those as well. Those are all really critical areas that companies can help.
Those are things that I think all of us as moms, like from a very personal standpoint, this is so important to me. I have two different children in two different stages of life. I'm a single mom. I have a 21-year-old who's in college, and then I have a 7-year-old who's in first grade. So I know firsthand the challenges of raising children now and raising our kind of adultish children too, right? It's
They
a
don't stop needing you.
no, they do not stop needing you, and you don't stop needing the time to be able to show up. So even though they're in two different, stages of life, and my daughter needs care in a different way, I still need the PTO, as Abby pointed to be able to go spend time with my son in college and get him transitioned. And I don't want to feel like I can't do that. And then I also need the support and being able to ensure that my daughter has the care that she needs so I can show up for work. And I know that as a woman of color and diversity, parent is also a diversity factor. It comes with unique needs. And as well, those things all overlap and overlay. I think it's really important that we always have these conversations. I'm appreciative of Abby and Pam's work because that means that we're having these challenging conversations, not only with the employers, but giving the moms the ability to show up armed with knowledge so that when they are speaking to their employers also about these things, that they have some facts they can fall back on. And I wish I had these things when I was showing up before, when I was a little younger with my now older son, where I was, empowered to speak to these things. So I want to give Pam and both Abby a little bit more time to say anything else you would want to give, as little nuggets to our community before we jump into Q&A. And then I'm excited about those questions because I'm sure our moms and our employers are have so many things they would like to get from both Pam and Abby. So is there anything else we should share, you guys would like to share before we jump into our Q&A?
Well, a couple of things from my perspective. I think, like you, I have a 21-year-old son. And one of the reasons that drew me to this work was the idea that, things hadn't shifted so much. When my son was young, I had really good work as a consultant. I would bring him with me everywhere. Obviously needed help, but I never, ever told my clients that I had a child or that I had other responsibilities. And as he got older, I saw that not much was changing. That, people I knew who were still having children were still doing the same thing. They were just, trying to hide the fact that they had other responsibilities. And so I really wanted to have that shift. And as you said, Kenefra, that shift happens in those conversations and in the data that we gather, in the research that we do, that really proves not only why organizations should care about these kind of things, but just how insidious they are.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk about needing more quality talent, they need to be looking at moms who can provide that quality talent, and they need to be giving support for that. So it's just a very critical issue. Now, next on deck for Werklabs, we're absolutely so excited to be doing a piece about mentorship and how organizations can work to build effective mentorship programs that create authentic relationships rather than forced partnerships. We hear the term mentorship being bandied about a lot, but we wanted to dive in and see what really makes an effective mentor for a person. How do you train a mentor, and what can people expect from a good mentorship? It's one thing to just give somebody the name mentor. It's another to act on it. And then we also have some really exciting work coming down the pike on flexibility. And here we're really doing our deepest dive yet into what drives flexible work experiences and how much has changed, certainly over the past 3 years. Typically, we had looked at flexibility as one driver feeding into employee experiences, such as what we did here for childcare. But for this work, we really unpack what drives flexibility and what makes it most effective in organizations.
I am excited for both of those things. I am a product of mentorship and sponsorship and opportunity and doors opening. So that conversation is exciting. And then we know how flexibility and mentorship ties into moms being able to show up authentically, having space for themselves, creating the access to childcare. Like, so all of these things tie together. And that's really exciting because that means not only are you supporting them through giving them the knowledge about childcare and the benefits there, but why flexibility is important and why mentorship means so much. Like, I'm sitting here in this space having the opportunity to speak to the two of you and our community at large because TNP provided mentorship for me before I ever got through this door. So there's so many things our organization does right. And I hope that we can pass that model on to other companies and employers so they can see the great value in moms and why this work is so important. Do we have any questions? Because I want to give the floor to our community and our audience to see if we can get some great, conversation going around some of your needs as well as not just mine. I will talk about all my needs. Okay, so Jackie Cook, thank you so much for your questions. Any insight into differences on who takes full parental leave? Moms do, but dads don't. What about the impact on women in the workforce? I want Pam to take this one. I know she's probably got some good insight here.
Yeah, let me start off because that's been a really interesting question. Now this is assuming that both moms and dads are offered parental leave and equal parental leave. And it does tend to be more likely. Well, let me say that in instances where companies are doing best-in-class parental leave programs, sometimes they'll also do a buyback program for people who don't want to take the full leave, maybe want to come back early. And we have found over 98% of the time, the ones who take the buyback is the non-birth partner. Typically, the dads are coming back early. And there's a good reason for that. They're not recovering physically from childbirth and all that comes with it. So they tend to be the ones that take it. And the issue with that becomes that it really leads to more gender disparity within workplaces, because then they're coming back and they're getting ahead and they're doing more. And then, the birth parent is coming back and still recovering from childbirth and still having to, make up for so-called lost time. So there can be difficulties even in organizations where there's equal leave being taken. The other thing is that for men, sometimes there's a stigma still. There shouldn't be, but there often is a stigma around taking parental leave. I've had men say to me that they were about to go out on parental leave, and a manager said to them, this is really not the best time for you to go. Well, you wouldn't say that to a woman. A baby's being born, best time or not, they need to go. The other thing for men is sometimes they'll come back from leave and people think that they've been on sabbatical. They think they're going to come back refreshed and ready to go. So that becomes very difficult. So again, here's where an education piece is really necessary for men and for women. So I guess the end on that question is that full parental leave tends to be taken more still by women than by men for those reasons. But the impact on women in the workforce, it still tends to be a detriment more for women than for men, because either they're perceived of not being able to do as much or not being able to bounce back as quickly, or it's difficult to get up and running. The companies that we coach, we talk to them a lot about giving a little extra time for women to get up and running once they're back, giving them 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks to get acclimated, and some other things that will help them come back better and stronger, but also enforcing those leaves for both men and women.
That's really important. And that's great insight, Pam, because we do know that I saw in the chat, this is men get mocked when they come back for taking that time off. And we also know that mom needs to support at home. So men also need to be able to take that time off to be with their partners if it's available. And that sleep deprivation with a newborn is real, whether
no joke.
Yes, it's no joke, whether you're the mom or the dad. And if you're trading off those responsibilities, that is difficult. So that is great insight. And to the person who shared that, thank you for sharing that. You're right, that shouldn't happen. And it goes back to where Dr. Pam said they need training. Our companies need training on how to be supportive and an ally to parents, mom and dad alike. Do we have any more questions? Vicki Kemp. I remember workplaces offering on-site childcare when I was growing up, but I don't think that's common anymore. Are workplaces looking into offering this benefit going forward?
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, as many organizations consider returning to the office. This is something that kind of comes back on the table as a way to attract moms and parents and incentivize them to kind of go back to the office. We've been talking as a Worklabs team, though, about how like a future model will likely be, kind of organizations coming together that are geographically maybe located within the same region to kind of, offer a collective service of childcare to parents who are in need of that. But what we are seeing typically that's a lot more common is going to be those childcare stipends, right? It really allows parents to kind of use it in a way that they feel comfortable, rather than just having one provider, and things like backup care is typically how we're seeing the offering of childcare or support for childcare from organizations right now. But it will be really interesting to see if that is a big part of trying to get people to return to the office, if on-site childcare becomes part of that again.
That's a really thoughtful thing. I'm thinking through that myself, because I know that there's some organizations that had that, that are now closing some of those childcare sites that they even had. A lot of organizations can't support the rising costs of those facilities as well as provide them. So those stipends, I think, are a great way to go about, because you do get the flexibility of choosing who takes care of your child, as well as using that money in the way that you see fit for your child and their care. So that may not be something that's coming back in the way that we're having on-site care, but the flexibility that having those stipends offered, could be really helpful too. Do we have any more audience questions? I love these questions. They're making me think. How does organizations like TNP, which drives this important research, ensure that information gets shared and heard by organizations, employers, and those empowered to change things for parents? Can I talk to this a little bit?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what I want to say is we advocate all the time with our employers for our moms. And I have the great pleasure of speaking to our clients and being supported by Werklabs in their research and how we can show up better for moms. So we have these conversations, we challenge them, we like being disruptors in these spaces for our moms. I enjoy having that conversation myself. I think it's so important. So we do speak truth to power. We do show up for our moms. We do have these conversations. We make sure that they get these same insights. So as we're sharing them with our community, we are sharing them with our employers. We are having these conversations. And I know that Pam can speak to this a little bit more as well, but we show up in these spaces and we arm someone like me, our diversity person, or our client-facing people in our organization, to have these thoughtful conversations. And then we bring in Werklabs so we can push them even further. So Pam, if you want to speak to that as well.
Oh, it would be hard to top that, but yes, I appreciate that. We Worklabs' function is to tackle issues like these and tackle them with data, with research, with statistics, with numbers that link back to bottom line performance, so that inarguably companies need to do something about these things for their own benefit, as well as for the benefit of people who work with them. And that's really what the crux of this is. So we're out there giving talks. We're out there helping to work on policies. We're out there working with individual organizations. And we're, keeping ourselves in the press and having those conversations. Sometimes they're difficult. Sometimes they're easier. Sometimes you're starting from scratch with companies who say, why should I even care about this? And sometimes they're saying, we're best in class, but we want to do even better. But both of those are heartening questions, because at least people are asking. We come up with the data that helps compel them to act. So that's a great question. And we are thrilled to be in this space working on those difficult issues with companies.
And it is important work. I want to say one thing, because I'm reading these comments in our chat, and I want to say that I know that change isn't always fast, but your voice is important. And when we're armed with this data and we're having these client conversations, if you're inside speaking to your employers as well about your needs and showing up and saying like, hey, this is a difficult space for me, or childcare is really important for us, and then we can help navigate those conversations with you on the other side with this research, it's really helpful. We're a partnership. Our community of moms in TNP, we work collaboratively with you. We're beside you, and change doesn't come quickly. We know that so many things, it's in the trenches and we're fighting for those things, but we're fighting beside you. And as you're speaking up in these spaces, so are we. And as our voices get louder together, change will come. So Worklabs arming us with this knowledge helps us to have that. So I do know that there's still challenges that we're all facing, and there's things that we're all going through every day, but we're going to get there. And as a group of moms and employers and TNP being a voice with you, we're working hard to change that landscape. So how does an organization which drives this important research ensures I think that I got that question. Okay. Are the metrics on mom guilt during the pandemic and before for unlimited PTO? The mom guilt. Abby?
Yeah, I mean, this speaks really well to the research that we mentioned that's coming up. So we just wrapped up interviews and analyzing the qualitative research on that. But one theme that did come up was this feeling of not being able to be present in your kids' lives if you're also trying to, drive a career in work as well. And that with that comes a real feeling and sense of mom guilt. And so we'll get some more data on that with the survey that will field that accompanies that qualitative research. But we certainly hear that, the pandemic sometimes allowed moms to experience aspects of their children's life that they weren't able to before. And that was a really sweet silver lining. And now, coming out of the pandemic or in this next phase, as organizations are returning to the office, as there's new considerations, there's a strong determination to continue to experience those and not experience quite the level of guilt that they might have before the pandemic, not being quite as present or working remotely at home to be able to experience those things. But to the point of this question, not having work and oftentimes virtual schooling in the same room under the same roof happening at the same time, there was a lot of mom guilt associated with that as well. So it's something we've definitely heard. It's something we plan to measure in the future going forward, and we'll use that data to just continue to drive change.
I'm excited to hear about that data. I think all of us as moms, Pam, all of us that have experienced being a mom guilt is difficult. It's so hard.
And insidious, yeah.
Yes, it's so hard. Like even you saying like you would show up with your son in all these spaces, but you wouldn't tell them that your son was with you. That's part of that mom guilt thing, right? So that is so difficult. And we got another question. I'm currently looking for a work from home position, and my daughter is home with me 2 times a week. How can I ask a future employer if it's okay that she's home with me on those days?
That's a great question. So, we recommend that conversations like that be brought up front, but, more as a matter of course. I mean, it's always good to start out with an affirmation about how much the job matters, how much you care, your ability to do the job, your interest in doing the job, your willingness and your commitment to doing the job. Once those things have been addressed, then it's fine to bring up things like, there's a couple of logistics that I want to talk about. My daughter's home with me two days a week, and then you can address whether or not she's home, and whether or not you have any help there, or you don't have any help if you're there by yourself. There are times that I need to step away during those days. What is the flexibility in terms of managing that schedule on those 2 days, and really showing that you've thought about it, that you've thought about the likely time commitment, the likely time you'll need to take away, whether or not you think, you have hours where she's napping, for example, that you think you'd be able to be on calls during that time, or maybe you don't think you would be at all. But most employers will really appreciate the fact that you've thought it through and that you're managing these things. Everybody knows that those things exists now. It's in the forefront, and employers really do want to hire more moms, more parents. But I think explaining and saying that you've already thought about it and you want to have a collaborative approach to how this is managed on those days can go a long way to showcasing your commitment to returning to work and also to being able to do that job well. Most employers will really appreciate that and be willing to work with you when you explain those things up front.
So have those tough conversations up front. Yeah, that's really important. So we have one more question we're going to take, and then we're going to wrap this up. We all know that my daughter, I'm going to do this in real time, is about to get off the bus, and I've got to do that thing that I love and figure out how her day went. So what companies are benchmarks for how they successfully support childcare needs of their employees? What kinds of companies factor this issue into their work culture? You want to take that, Pam? And I can say TNP does, but
yeah, I mean, there are different types of organizations that tend to be very good, and certainly an organization like ours, you would hope would be best in class. They tend to be companies who do take flexibility very seriously, and not just for their employees that have children. But also for employees who have other needs as well. The companies that factor this issue into work culture are companies that tend to be progressive. They tend to also simultaneously be working on and or have good DEI policies. They tend to be very aware of current culture, and they tend to be one of the things that Werklabs has been focusing a lot on now are what do companies do to build empathetic, nurturing company cultures, and spoiler alert, a lot of that has to do with hiring more moms in the culture because moms make great manager. But those kind of companies that are focused around issues like that and willing to be more flexible in the ways that they do business. There's a lot of tech companies as well, big tech companies that are looking at as they look to attract and retain more female talent. They tend to be that way as well. But again, in the startup world, you want to find that organizations that are really walking the walk as well as talking the talk around building empathetic cultures. They're coming to their employees, they're asking them what they need, and they're following up with respect for those needs.
And
I
would just add that similar to that, it goes beyond companies and managers as well, right? If you're listening and you're a manager, like from our research, we see that you have the ability to demonstrate support for childcare, that it's at the manager and coworker level too. So organizational policies are key, but then individual contributors can really work towards creating a team culture, right, of supporting childcare needs. And that's a way to start driving change within organizations as well.
That's excellent answers. Culture matters, employees matter, the way that they're treated matters. I'm so grateful that I got to have this conversation with Abby and Pam. I learned so much from both of you all the time. I'm going to shamelessly plug myself for that conversation you're going to have around mentors. I would love to see how that goes and be a part of that conversation. And Richard, yes, we hire single dads. Single dads are important. Single moms are important. I see you. I hear you. My name is Kenefra Carter. You can find me on LinkedIn. Richard, send me your information. Let's chat, because we really believe in the work that we do. And if we can support another dad or mom in this space, I want to be able to do that. So I wanted to say that I saw you. I hear you. Please reach out. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you so much, Abby, for the work that you are doing. I hope these conversations continue to create change, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Kenefra. This was great.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Have to take care, you guys.
Bye.